My name is Rachel Holt. I'm 29 years old. When I was 24, my father stood up at a restaurant table in front of 43 people celebrating my brother's medical school graduation and tapped his wine glass with a fork. Everyone went quiet. He smiled the way he always smiled at those moments, wide, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in the bathroom mirror. He looked at my brother and said, "We raised a doctor." The table erupted. Then he looked at me, almost as an afterthought, and said, "And we raised an artist." He paused just long enough. "One of those pays the bills." The table laughed. He sat down. My brother laughed. My mother smiled into her napkin. I picked up my purse, walked out of Trattoria Stella in downtown Ann Arbor, and I didn't look back. Not for 5 years. Then, one Tuesday morning in March, I was in my apartment in Portland, making coffee, when my phone buzzed on the counter. My brother. A voicemail. 4 words. "Call me. It's Dad." He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. I knew when I pressed play that whatever came next was going to cost me something. I just didn't know yet how much my family had already taken. Let me take you back to what it looked like from the outside. The Holt family. Orchard Hills subdivision. Saline, Michigan. 4-bedroom colonial. 2-car garage. A mailbox with our last name in block letters. My father was a cardiothoracic surgeon at University of Michigan Health. My mother taught AP chemistry at Pioneer High School. My brother was 4 years older than me and had wanted to be a doctor since he was 9 years old, when my father let him listen to a patient's heartbeat through his stethoscope on Bring Your Kid to Work Day. I remember watching my father's face in that moment. I'd never seen him look at anything the way he looked at my brother then, like something he'd built, like proof. I was the one who drew on everything. Sketchbooks, napkins, the backs of permission slips. My mother bought me a drafting table for my 12th birthday and put it in the corner of my bedroom, and I used it every single day until I left for college. I didn't want to be a doctor. I wanted to make things. I wanted to design book covers and museum posters and logos that made people stop walking and actually look. I thought that was allowed. I thought we were the kind of family where 2 different kinds of smart could exist. I was wrong about that. My father never said anything cruel about my art when I was a kid. He just said nothing at all. My brother would get home from a shift shadowing at the hospital, and my father would pour 2 glasses of orange juice at the kitchen counter, one for himself, one for my brother, and they would stand there talking for an hour. Medical cases, ethical dilemmas. What you do when a patient refuses treatment. I would come in from the garage where I'd been painting, and my father would look up briefly. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Good." Then back to my brother. I learned to stop coming in through the kitchen. The dinner table was my father's operating room. He ran it with surgical precision. He asked my brother about his MCAT prep, about his research internship, about his letters of recommendation. He asked me, when he remembered to, what class I was struggling with. I stopped struggling with classes junior year of high school, but he never updated that assumption. I graduated with a 3.9 and a full scholarship to the University of Michigan's Stamp School of Art and Design. My father said, "That's a real school?" Not meanly. Genuinely curious. I didn't answer. I packed my room, and I left. College was the first time in my life I felt like the smart one. Not the artistic one. Not the other one. Just smart. I designed a rebrand for a student nonprofit my sophomore year, and they put it on shirts and banners, and I would see people wearing those shirts on the diag and feel something that I didn't have a name for yet. I know now what it was. It was pride that didn't need anyone else to confirm it. I graduated with honors in 2018. I got a job offer from a design agency in Detroit before I walked across the stage. I didn't tell my father about the offer until I'd already accepted it. He said, "What does a graphic designer actually do all day?" I said, "Make things people remember." He said, and turned back to his coffee. I moved to Detroit, then Chicago, then Portland, Oregon, when I was 27, when I got hired as a senior art director at a branding studio in the Pearl District called Foundry Creative. My salary was $81,000 a year. I had a 1-bedroom apartment on Northwest 23rd with exposed brick and a window I kept covered in reference images and color swatches. I had a therapist named Dr. Okafor I saw every other Thursday. I had friends, real ones, the kind you meet in your late 20s when everyone is done performing. I was building something. I could feel it. My brother's medical school graduation was May 14th, 2020. COVID had pushed the ceremony back a year, and when it finally happened, my father threw a dinner at Trattoria Stella and invited everyone. Grandparents, aunts, my father's colleagues, his department head. 43 people in the private dining room. I flew in from Portland because my brother asked me to, and because I still believed, at 24, that these events were the ones you showed up for regardless. My brother had earned it. I want to be clear about that. He'd worked brutally hard. 6 years of medical school, brutal hours, no sleep, a level of discipline I genuinely respected. I was proud of him. I told him so in the parking lot before we went in. He hugged me and said, "I'm glad you're here, Rach." I believed him. The dinner was beautiful. Real linen tablecloths, 4 courses, a sommelier, my father at the head of the table, sunburned from a golf weekend, wearing the blue sport coat he saved for occasions he considered worthy of it. He was in his element. He stood up 3 times to make toasts. The third one was the one that mattered. He raised his glass and looked at my brother. His voice was warm, full. The voice he used when he was performing happiness rather than feeling it. He talked about the day my brother came home from that hospital visit at 9 years old and announced he was going to be a surgeon. He talked about my brother's work ethic, his compassion, his future. Then he looked at me, and he smiled. And I thought for one small, stupid second that he was going to include me in something. "And then there's Rachel," he said, still finding herself at 24. He said it the way you say a punchline when you've set it up perfectly. The room laughed. Colleagues laughed. My grandmother laughed in that confused way. She laughed at things she didn't fully hear. My brother smiled into his wine. My mother was already looking at her plate. I didn't cry. I want to say that clearly. I put my napkin on the table, and I picked up my purse, and I walked through the dining room, and through the front door, and into the May air on Washington Street, and I stood on the sidewalk for exactly 90 seconds. Then I called an Uber. Then I went to the hotel I'd booked, not my childhood bedroom, never that, and I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling and thought, I will not let this be the last thing. My phone lit up at 11:17 p.m. My brother. "Rach, where'd you go?" Dad's asking. I turned it face down. At 11:52 p.m., my mother. "Are you okay? You know how your father is." I blocked her number. Then my father's. Then my brother's. Then I made a list in the Notes app on my phone of every aunt and uncle and cousin who had laughed in that room. 8 contacts. Gone in 4 minutes. Then I lay back down and made a different kind of list. Not names. Rules. Things I would not do again. I will not fly home for events that are not for me. I will not sit at tables where my value is measured against my brother's. I will not wait for my father to change. I will not explain my work to someone who doesn't want to understand it. I will not need them. I flew back to Portland the next morning. I cried on the plane, the quiet kind, looking out the window over the Rockies. Not because I was broken. Because I was done. The next 2 years were the most productive of my life. I threw everything into Foundry Creative. I led a rebrand for a regional hospital system. The irony was not lost on me that won a design industry award in 2022. My salary went to $91,000. I started taking on freelance clients on evenings and weekends. An outdoor apparel brand out of Seattle. A restaurant group in San Francisco. A nonprofit in New York that worked with first-generation college students. That last one I charged half my usual rate because I liked what they were doing. I didn't tell anyone that. I adopted a cat from the Multnomah County shelter. A gray tabby named Vesper. I joined a ceramics studio on Burnside and went every Sunday morning. I started running, badly at first, then less badly. I ran the Portland Half Marathon in October 2022. My finishing time was 2 hours and 9 minutes. I took a photo of the medal and texted it to Dr. Okafor and my 2 closest friends from the studio, Maya and Dom. I didn't post it anywhere. It felt too good to share with strangers. I didn't talk about my family with most people. When the question came up at dinners, at work, with people I was dating, I said my family was in Michigan, and we weren't close. That was accurate enough. The few people I trusted with more than that understood without needing me to catalog it. My friend Maya's father had never learned her name correctly in 31 years. Dom had a sister who called only when she needed money. We'd built our own table. Nobody had to earn a seat at it. Then came March of this year. Tuesday. I was standing at my kitchen counter waiting for the espresso to pull, Vesper weaving between my feet, the Pearl District still gray outside the window at 7:40 inches the morning. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. Portland area code. I thought spam. Then it buzzed again. Same number. Then a voicemail notification came through. I almost didn't listen to it. I pressed play because I had nothing else to do with my hands while the coffee finished. Rach, it's me, my brother's voice. Older. Something in it I hadn't heard before. A thinness, like a wire pulled too tight. Call me. It's Dad, please. I stood in my kitchen for 6 minutes without moving. Vesper jumped onto the counter and I picked her up and held her and thought about all the ways that voicemail could go. None of them were good. I called him back at 8:03 a.m. He answered before the second ring. Thank you, he said immediately. Thank you for calling. The relief in his voice made me careful. What happened? Dad had a stroke. 3 weeks ago. He's stable now, but Rach, he needs surgery. His carotid artery. It's serious. He paused. He's been asking for you. Something in my jaw tightened. Has he? I know how that sounds. But it's bad and Mom can't handle this alone and I'm his attending of record so I can't be his surgeon and I need someone who isn't me to be in that house right now. Why me? Because you're the only one who ever handled things without falling apart. I almost said you noticed that. I almost said a lot of things. Instead I asked about the surgery, the timeline, the prognosis. My brother walked me through it the way he would a patient's family member, clear, measured, clinical. He'd learned that from our father. I'd spent 5 years not thinking about what my father had taught either of us. It turned out he'd taught us quite a lot. We just didn't recognize it as his until we were older. I said I needed 48 hours. He said okay. He texted me the address of our parents' house, same subdivision, and I almost wrote back, I know the address. But I didn't. I called Dr. Okafor that afternoon. Emergency session. She asked me the same thing she always asked when my family came up. What do you owe them? I said nothing, she said. Then what's pulling you toward going? I was quiet for a long time. I told her I wasn't sure it was about my father at all. Maybe it was about seeing the house again and not coming apart. Maybe it was about proving to myself that those 5 years had actually done what I needed them to do. She said, that's worth examining. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She never did, and I had stopped resenting her for it. I booked a flight to Detroit for Friday. One way. I didn't know how long I'd need. I wrote out my conditions in my journal Thursday night. Not as drama as clarity. I will not stay in the house overnight. I will not apologize for the last 5 years. I will not let my mother manage my emotions for her own comfort. I will not discuss my career as if it requires defending. I will talk to my father. That's it. I will leave when I decide to leave. I texted my brother. I'll be there Saturday by noon. I'm not staying at the house. I have a hotel. He replied, that's fine, thank you. I landed at DTW at 9:47 a.m. The drive from the airport to Saline took 41 minutes on a Saturday. I'd rented a car because I didn't want to need anyone for transportation. The October sky was flat and gray the way Michigan skies get in fall. Like someone had pulled a drop cloth over the sun. I drove through Saline on the roads I'd driven 1,000 times, and nothing had changed except that the Panera on Michigan Avenue was now a Chase Bank. I sat in the rental car in the driveway for 3 minutes. The house was the same, blue shutters, birch tree in the front yard that had been there since I was 7, my mother's ceramic pot on the porch with whatever seasonal arrangement she planted every October without fail. Normal, preserved. A snow globe of a life I had left. I texted my brother. I'm outside. The front door opened before I reached the porch steps. My mother. She was smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just different now. She was wearing her reading glasses pushed up on her head, which meant she'd been doing something when I pulled in and had just put it down. Her eyes were red. Not from crying right now, from weeks of it. I recognized the difference. You came, she said. I said I would. She reached for me and I let her hug me, briefly. I stepped back before she could hold on. "How is he?" I asked. "Tired. Scared, I think, though he won't say so." She held the door open. "He's in the study." I walked in. The house smelled like it always had coffee, and the specific brand of fabric softener my mother had used for 30 years, and something underneath that, the smell of a house that had been lived in long enough to carry its own memory. I didn't let myself stand there and breathe it. I kept moving. The living room was almost exactly as I remembered it. The same framed photos on the wall above the piano. My brother's medical school diploma, his college graduation photo, his high school graduation photo, the family portrait we'd taken at JCPenney when I was 11, my brother 13, both of us in matching khaki. My parents' wedding photo. I stood in front of that wall and counted 17 framed things. I appeared in 3 of them. The JCPenney portrait, a Christmas photo from when I was maybe 7, and a group shot from my grandmother's 80th birthday. 0 from my college graduation. 0 from any professional milestone. The wall had been edited the same way a Wikipedia article gets edited quietly, over time, until the original version is something you have to dig for. My father was in the study at the back of the house. He was in the leather chair that had been there since I was in middle school, a fleece blanket across his legs, which was the most startling thing. My father, who operated on human hearts, under a blanket like someone's grandfather. He looked at me when I walked in and something crossed his face that I didn't expect. Not guilt. Something closer to relief. Like he had been waiting for a verdict, and the judge had finally shown up. "Rachel," he said. His voice was slower than I remembered. The stroke had touched something in his tempo. "Hi," I said. I didn't add anything. I sat in the chair across from him, the one my mother always used, and I looked at him directly. I'd practiced this. Not the words, the steadiness. We sat in silence for a moment. He spoke first. "You look like yourself." "I am myself." "I know." He shifted slightly. I wasn't sure you'd come," my brother asked. "I'm glad he did." He looked at his hands. "I'm sorry, Rachel. For what I said. At the dinner. I've wanted to say that for a long time. I waited to feel something shift. Something didn't. Why didn't you?" "Because I was wrong. And I don't do well with that." "I know you don't." I kept my voice even. "Did you mean it, when you said I was still finding myself?" He was quiet. "Dad. I didn't understand what you were doing," he said finally. "I understand achievement in certain shapes. Your brother's work looked like the shape I knew. Yours didn't. That's not it wasn't fair. It was my limitation, not yours." It was the closest thing to an apology my father had ever offered me in 29 years. I let it land. I didn't perform being moved by it. I said, "Thank you for saying that." I meant it, partially. Partially, I was sitting there thinking about what else I needed to do while I was in this house. We talked for an hour. About the surgery timeline. About what recovery looked like. About my brother's role in managing it. My father asked about Portland. About my work. When I told him about the hospital rebrand that won the award, he said, "That's good work, Rachel." Genuinely. It was such a simple thing. It was the simplest possible thing. And I noticed what it cost me to hear it, the small grief of realizing how long I had gone without it. Before I left the study, my brother appeared in the doorway and said he wanted to show me something he'd found when he and my mother were going through the study files to get insurance paperwork together. He said it in a careful tone. The tone he used when he was about to say something he didn't fully know how to say. He led me to the hallway, away from the study. He was holding a manila envelope. "I found this 2 weeks ago, when I was looking for Dad's living will," he said. "I didn't know what to do with it." He handed it to me. The return address on the envelope was Yale School of Art. The postmark was April 2016, my senior year of high school. The envelope had been opened. My hands were completely steady. I pulled out the letter. "Dear Miss Holt, we are delighted to offer you admission to the Master of Fine Arts program, beginning in September 2016, with a full merit scholarship valued at $48,000 per year for 2 years. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, because I needed to confirm it was real. I had applied to Yale's MFA program the fall of my senior year of high school, not to attend. I was 17. I had no undergraduate degree, Yet I'd entered their national portfolio review for high school seniors, which sometimes resulted in early admission offers to their pre-college intensive and occasionally, rarely, offered deferred undergraduate admission to students they considered exceptional. I had submitted a portfolio of 43 pieces. I had never heard back. I had assumed I hadn't made it. I had applied to Michigan instead, gotten a scholarship there, and moved on. I stood in the hallway of my childhood home holding a letter from 2016 that I had never seen. I looked at my brother. His face told me he already understood what I was looking at. "Where was it?" I asked. "Filing cabinet, back of the drawer. In a folder labeled Rachel Misk." I went back into the study. I didn't raise my voice. I've never been someone who raises their voice when it matters most. I sat down in the chair across from my father again, and I put the letter on the coffee table between us, and I turned it so he could read it, and I waited. He looked at it for a long time. His face didn't change the way I expected it to. He didn't look caught. He looked tired. He looked, for the first time in my memory, genuinely old. "Dad, you were 17, he said quietly. I was 17, and someone at Yale thought I was exceptional enough to offer me a scholarship. You would have gone. You would have been in New Haven at 17 with no plan. No, that was my decision to make. You were a child. I was your child. Not yours to hide from." I kept my voice even, completely even. "You decided my future was yours to manage. You took that letter, and you put it in a folder, and you filed it in a drawer, and you let me believe I wasn't good enough. For 13 years. He closed his eyes. "You stood in front of 43 people and said I was still finding myself. My voice didn't waver. I had found myself at 17. You just didn't want to see it." My mother appeared in the doorway. She'd been listening, I think, from the hall. "Diane." My father said her name like a question. She looked at me. Something in her face broke open in the way things break when they've been held together past the point of holding. "I knew," she said quietly. "I knew about the letter. He was afraid you'd go and not come back." She pressed her hand over her mouth. "I should have told you. I've thought about it every year since." I looked at my mother for a long moment. She had stood at that table and smiled into her napkin. She had watched that dining room laugh and done nothing. She had known about a letter from Yale for 13 years and said nothing. And I thought about what my therapist had said once, about how complicity doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it just looks like a woman who is too afraid of her husband to make a different choice for 29 years in a row. I said, "I know you're sorry." I said it to both of them. "I'm going to need some time with all of this." I stood up. "I'll be back tomorrow to talk about the surgery logistics. I'm not doing that today." "Rachel," my father said. "I'll be back tomorrow." I picked up the manila envelope. I took it with me. My brother walked me to the door. Outside on the porch, in the cold Michigan October air, he looked like he didn't know what to do with his hands. "I didn't know," he said. "About the letter. I swear I didn't." "I believe you." "I'm sorry," I laughed. "At the dinner. I've thought about it." He exhaled. "I was spineless and I'm sorry." I looked at my brother, this person who had occupied the place of honor at the table for as long as I could remember, who had been the shape of achievement my father understood, who had also, in his own way, been living inside a set of expectations he'd never chosen. I didn't forgive him right then. But I didn't close the door either. "Let's talk tomorrow," I said. He nodded. I walked to my car. I sat in the rental car in the driveway, and I did not cry. I held the Yale letter in my lap, and I thought about who I would have been if I'd gone. I thought about the studio in New Haven, the professors, the cohort of people who saw the same things I saw in the same ways. I thought about all the years I'd spent in Michigan and Chicago and Portland building the proof that I was worth something without anyone handing it to me. And then I put the letter on the passenger seat and I drove to my hotel and I got into the shower and I let myself feel the full weight of it for exactly 20 minutes. Then I dried off, and I ordered Thai food to my room, and I called Dr. Okafor's after-hours line and left a message summarizing what had happened, and then I called Maya and talked for an hour, and then I slept. Over the next 3 days I did what I came to do. I sat with my brother and mapped out a care plan for my father's surgery and recovery. I found a patient advocate through University of Michigan Health who could manage communication between my father's team and our family. I created a shared document with every physician, every follow-up appointment, every insurance reference number, color-coded. My brother looked at it and said, "How do you just do this?" I said, "I'm good at making things that are complicated look clear. It's literally my job." He laughed. It was a surprised laugh. The kind that comes when you suddenly see someone differently. I had one more conversation with my father before I flew home. He was clearer that day, more like himself. He asked me what I was going to do with the letter. "Nothing," I said. "It's mine. I'm going to keep it." He nodded. "You could have done something with that program." "I did something without it." "You did," he looked at me. "You're exceptional, Rachel. You were exceptional at 17, and I was afraid of it, and I made a mistake that I cannot undo. I understand if you can't forgive me for that." "I don't know if I can," I said honestly. "I'm not going to tell you I forgive you when I don't know if that's true yet. What I can tell you is that I'm here, and the surgery is scheduled, and you're going to have people taking care of you who are good at it. That's what I can give you right now." He was quiet for a long time. "That's more than I deserve." "Probably," I said. And I meant it without cruelty. I flew back to Portland on a Sunday. At the airport, I bought a black coffee and sat at the gate and looked at the Yale letter one more time. Then I folded it and put it in the front pocket of my carry-on, and I closed the zipper, and I let it be what it was, proof of something I'd always been, discovered too late to change the path, but not too late to carry forward. My father had his surgery in November. It went well. He spent 12 days in the hospital, and then another 3 weeks in a rehabilitation facility in Ann Arbor. I wasn't there for any of it in person. We'd established a system. My brother was managing the medical side, and I was managing the administrative piece remotely, which was the right distribution of strengths. My mother texted me updates, and I responded to everyone. That was new. That was something. My brother and I talk now. Not every week, but sometimes, when he's done with a long shift and I'm finishing up in the studio, he'll call and we'll talk about nothing in particular. His residency, a show I watched, a patient he's thinking about. Once he asked me about the ceramics classes, and I sent him a photo of a bowl I'd made, and he said, "That's actually really beautiful, Rach." And I said, "I know." He laughed. My father sent me an email in December. Long, careful, clearly written over multiple drafts. He talked about his recovery, about the things you think about when you've spent 12 days in a hospital bed, about a conversation he had with his surgeon, a woman, younger than him, who had very clear opinions about what mattered. He said she reminded him of me. He said he'd thought about that for a long time. He didn't ask for forgiveness again. He just wrote what was true and sent it. I read it twice. I didn't reply immediately. I let it sit in my inbox for 4 days. The way you let something sit when you're not sure yet what to do with it, but you know it deserves more than a quick response. Then I wrote back. Not much. Just that I'd read it, and that I appreciated him saying it, and that I was glad the surgery had gone well. I signed it, Rachel. Not love. Not talk soon. Just my name. That felt right. Not closed. Not open. Just honest. My mother and I are still working through what she knew and why she stayed quiet. That's slower. Some things are. I told her that I needed her to understand that choosing to stay silent is also a choice, and that it has consequences, and that I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. She said she understood. I don't know yet if she does, but she's trying, and I'm letting her try, from a distance I control. The Yale letter is framed now, in my apartment in Portland, on the wall above my drafting table. Not because I need the validation. I stopped needing it from that particular direction a long time ago. I framed it because it's mine, because someone saw it, once, and my father took it and put it in a drawer, and I spent 13 years not knowing it existed. And now I know. And I am the only one who gets to decide what I do with that knowledge. People ask me if I regret the last 5 years, the silence, the distance, the holidays I spent with Maya and Dom, instead of driving to Celine. The answer is no. I would have gone back too soon. I would have gone back before I knew what I was going back to, which is the surest way to lose what you've built. The silence gave me Portland and Foundry Creative and Vesper and Ceramics on Sunday mornings, and the half-marathon medal, and Dr. Okafor, and two friends who feel more like family than most of my actual family ever did. The silence was not punishment, it was construction. I was building something where there had only been a vacant lot. I still don't know if what I'm doing with my parents is reconciliation or something smaller, something more careful, something that doesn't have an obvious name yet. I'm not in a hurry to name it. I know my limits. I know what I need. I know that I will leave the moment any of it starts to cost me more than I can afford. That's not cruelty. That's what 5 years of hard work looks like in practice. If you've listened this far, thank you. If you've ever sat at a table and been the punchline. If you've ever been the one who was still finding herself while someone else got the standing ovation. If you've ever blocked a number and lain awake wondering whether you made the right call or whether you were just being dramatic, you weren't. The people who need you to doubt yourself are the ones who need you to stay small. I have one question before I go, and I genuinely don't have the answer. If you found a letter, something taken from you, something that proved you were always enough, long before you believed it, what would you do with it? Would you let it rewrite your past? Would you let it close something? Or would you frame it on the wall and let it just be yours? Leave me a comment. I read all of them. My name is Rachel Holt. I'm 29 years old. I am not still finding myself. I found myself 5 years ago, alone in a parking lot in Ann Arbor, the moment I decided that laughter at my expense was the last thing I would sit still for. I never needed anyone to see it first. I just needed to know it myself.